Hello everybody, welcome to Comic Book Radio, episode 30. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti, and tonight my guest is Aaron LOPRESTI, or some of you might know him as Lopez. I don't know how that came about, but we're going to discuss that and more tonight. I want to just preface this by saying that I'm very excited to have Aaron on the show. This is the first time he's on the show, and hopefully it won't be the last. Before we do bring him on, I want to say hello to those in the chat. We got Mr. Chemo. Mr. Chemo here. We got Citizen Ronan. What's up? Metatron's Cube as well. Brian Suddenly Old. Hey, how's it going? We got 10-8 Comics and Jim. What's up, 10-8 Comics? Fritzy Schnitzel is here. Hey, Fritzy. We got Leg Kick 1 as well. All right, that looks like it's it for now. That's it for now. Hey, what's up, Brian? Yeah. All right, without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour, Mr. Aaron LOPRESTI. What's up, Aaron?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem.
Got a little excited there with the intro, all those movie clips, man. Taking me back a little bit.
Yeah, some of my favorites, and mixed in with a little bit of humor, but we want to try to give maximum impact here and get people pumped up before we start.
When we were talking backstage before we started the show, I was looking behind you and I said, man, that looks like an old Marvel editorial office behind you. A bunch of comic stuff up all on the wall. Boxes of stuff and the file. It does. I mean, I feel like I'm just sitting across from an editor here right now.
And in many ways you are.
That's true. You are. So it's a good look.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Leg Kick. Appreciate that. Hey, what's up, Tarks? Thanks for joining us tonight. And hey, AL. Thank you. You guys are coming in. Appreciate it. So again, my guest tonight is Aaron LOPRESTI. This is Comic Book Radio, episode 30. We're going to be talking about Western horror because he's got Wraith of God, and we're also going to be talking about a couple things regarding becoming an entrepreneur and a self-publisher. The word on the street, Aaron, is that you've been transitioning to a self-publisher.
Let's be careful.
It's the hottest thing in comics.
It is transitioning, to self-publishing. Yeah, that's true. That's it was quite a shock, actually. I didn't. You don't ever know what you're getting into, right, until you get into it, and then you experience it. No matter what anybody says
about anything ever.
Yeah, you can be as prepared as you want to be, but then there's always this stuff that comes up, and just juggling still trying to be a creative person, an artist, a writer, and then also be a publisher. And then also YouTubing for promotion and all that kind of stuff. I've never been as busy as I have been in my life. I was like, man, if I only thought of doing this when I was 30, if there was only Indiegogo and Kickstarter when I was 30, right? But sadly there wasn't. So.
Right. Yeah, even I'm in my 17th going on 18th year in comics, and even when I started, it was a very different field. There wasn't any of that crowdfunding stuff, and there wasn't even digital comics yet. We got in thinking like 2008, 2009, something like that. We were one of the very first publishers on Kindle and then also on Comixology at that time. And
You're a trailblazer.
What a different everything. I think print on demand was kind of around, but that was about it.
I remember I was at a Emerald City Comic Con. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a while ago. And Kickstarter had just started, and somebody had just launched a digital newspaper. Like, it can't be a digital newspaper strip, but you know what I mean, like a daily strip.
Yeah.
Digitally, and they raised like $1 million to put it on, and no one had ever heard of this guy, and we were like, what is this? What is this Kickstarter thing? How did he just make $1 million? And so we're all sort of thinking about, oh my gosh, is this the future? And sure enough, it is indeed the future, and here we are in it.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been independent, so for those that don't know, I never worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, whatever. I had honestly, when I started off, I knew I wanted to do something in comics, but I wanted to work for Wizard magazine. And then by the time I was out of college, Wizard magazine was just not the magazine I grew up with. As soon as they shifted from the comic book size to the magazine size, I was like, it just don't feel the same, and it never felt the same again. And then it only had a few years after that. But I knew I wanted again. I wanted to make comics. I wanted to be involved in comics somehow, and I always thought it was a stepping stone to do my own, and then eventually I'll work for someone else. But the more I kept making my own, and the more I kept getting out there and talking to people and everything else, I figured I don't really want to work for someone else. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. Now, in terms of what happened with you, where I mean, you worked for other publishers.
Yes.
You worked for the big guys, right? So it's probably been quite the and what a loaded word nowadays. It's been quite the transition for you.
Go again with that word. Yes and no, because I've always had the right mindset. When I was like 18, I guess, and I was trying to break into mainstream, and I would like, I was hitting a brick wall because I was 18, right? I wasn't ready yet. But, I started doing that stuff, but I was still making my own comics. I was drawing my own stuff. I had my own ideas and characters and storylines. So I was calling like Sparta Publishing in Sparta, Illinois, which used to be the publisher that handled Marvel and DC. And I was getting price quotes, and because I was like, I'll just publish my own books, and all that kind of stuff. And of course I never did it, but I was gathering information, and, and it was always something that I wanted to do. I mean, even going back farther when I was, 12 and 13, and, we had me and a buddy across the street, we had our own comics brand, name.
Yeah.
And do our own books, at least the covers and maybe a couple pages. Then I get bored and move on to the next one. But it was always sort of in my DNA to kind of do that. But then when I finally broke in at Marvel or DC, it's kind of like you start getting in, right? And then it becomes sort of this, it's almost like an addiction, right? Because I didn't start with a splash. I wasn't Arthur Adams who went in and did Long Shot, and then I'm doing X-Men, and then everybody thinks I'm the greatest thing since, sliced bread. But I was kind of the slow crawl up the mountain. And so I was like, if I could just get to Spider-Man, if I could just, and so, and then you get into it and you start working regularly and you start getting that regular paycheck. And then all these ideas of, I'm going to, publish myself and stuff, they all go in the back burner as you're grinding out and trying to establish this goal. And then once you get in and you're getting regular work, it's just like, you're always looking for your next job. You don't have enough time to kind of step back and go, if I took a year off and I just did this and self-published and all this kind of stuff, you never, you don't have time to stop and think about doing that. And plus, when I was doing this, and of course I broke in the like very late 80s, early 90s, you still were looking at having to come up with the money yourself to publish the book and then get it distributed and pray to God someone buys it, right? Where now you can kind of take care of all those things at the same time. You're putting it out there, you're raising the money, there's your customer base with crowdfunding. So it was a lot scarier back then when, it was just like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to publish 20,000 copies and just hope that's, I mean, that's what you started doing, right? Before there was any crowdfunding to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and we started small with print on demand. There was no way that I was going to say, let's just go right into big time professional printing, print up 1,000 copies and then just hope people buy them, a field of dreams, the whole thing. So we started off with print on demand for about 2 years and just doing signings, local shows and selling online and whatever. But yeah, it totally feels like you're throwing a Hail Mary pass and you have no idea who's at the other end of the field. Yeah, is anyone going to catch this thing?
I know. I remember a guy coming up to me at a con, and this is when I might have been back when I was working at Malibu, working on Sludge on the Ultraverse books, and telling me that he had, he had his own idea, and it was, comics were exploding or just kind of at the just starting to taper off, from that the boom of the late 80s, early 90s, where everybody was just making money like crazy. And so he had his own title, and he showed me the book, and it was and he had said he printed up 20,000 copies and he was going to try and sell them. And I was like, even back then I was like, dude, you need to go into Diamond Catalog and see if you can get the orders first before you so I don't know what he ever ended up doing with his 20,000 books that he printed up, because I'm sure he didn't sell them. but
Litter boxes, toilet
yeah,
paper.
that's a lot of money to invest and get no return on. But the guys were doing that, you know,
Wow.
and I was never quite that courageous.
Now,
Um,
you said something earlier, which I think is great and is very important. And I don't know if you caught it or if the chat caught it, but you were talking about how um, basically self-publishing and creating is in and has been in your DNA.
yeah,
Now, that is a really good point, and that is something I've mentioned a lot because a lot of people think, oh, they see someone like yourself or whoever else that's doing it and having success, and they think, well, how hard could it be, and so they go in there and and I'm not even talking about someone who's making comics. I'm talking about there's people who just have a fleeting interest in making comics, and they think, oh, well, now's obviously the time because anybody could apparently do it.
right.
And number one, how insulting. Whether they realize it or not, how insulting to the people they're looking at for inspiration and thinking like, hey, if they could do it, anyone could do it.
Right.
But
It's
it doesn't
amazing
mean
how often that happens just in any creative field. Oh,
yeah,
I can
yeah,
do that. And you're like, yeah, sure you
yeah.
can.
And there's
But
people I find all the time where they go in there and they're thinking like, I come in guns blazing and I do this and I do that. They got all the answers, right? They're not willing to ask questions. They already have all the answers.
right.
And then they come in and they fall flat on their face. They get discouraged. They get resentful. They get bitter. Usually they end up lashing out at their customers or potential customers. It's their fault. They didn't buy the book, that kind of a thing. It really is something that when you look across the board at who is successful, you do find that there's that element. There's that it factor. There's that it's in their DNA. They're creators. They strive. They're self-motivated. They're problem solvers. They're asking more questions than posing more answers.
Right.
It's such an important thing, and I think it's a great point that you had brought up.
Well, and there's also a learning curve, right? I mean, you can be a fan for 30 years and understand the language of comics and know all the universes and how everything connects and all the characters and stuff. But that's still not the same thing as understanding what sells and what doesn't sell. And I'll bet like when you started and you trying, whatever your first ideas were that you were out there, you didn't have any idea of what was going to sell, but by doing it, you start to kind of get a rhythm. You start to understand this type of thing works better than this type of thing does. So I'm going to go in this direction. And the same with me, even though I haven't been self-publishing anywhere near as long as you have, obviously, but being in the mainstream comic industry for 30 years, you could pretty much look at a book and say, I was put on books that I knew were going to get canceled before 12 issues. And it didn't, like when I did Amethyst for DC, when they came and told me, hey, we need you to do Amethyst, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Because I knew it wouldn't sell. And even if I busted my butt, which I did, and I thought the book looked really, really good, and it was written really well, it was a really good book, I knew it wouldn't sell. And it didn't even get to 12 issues before they canceled it. So you sort of can develop that by experience, and you get a better idea. And of course, there's no surefire answer to that, right, of what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. But you start to get a pretty good idea and a pretty good feel for, okay, like me, for example, if I'm going to do this Western, how can I do this Western that's going to give it the biggest appeal, that's going to be more interesting to a wider variety of people, rather than just saying, gosh darn it, I'm going to do Rio Bravo because I want to, and, come hell or high water. You have to take those things into consideration, and having years of experience working on the other side of the industry, meaning in the, either publishing or working professionally in some capacity, you start to see those things and you start to say, yeah, okay, I can kind of tell why that succeeded and why this didn't. Why did Kazar with Mark Waid and Andy Kubert still not do very well? So by the time they got to issue 12, both of them wanted off the book. Right. So those are the kind of things you kind of look at and pay attention to, and you start developing a sense of this. I think this will work, or yeah, I don't think this will. And of course, you can never be 100% right, but at least having that experience and that knowledge base to draw from is a lot different than, like you said, a guy just coming in and going, hey, everybody's making money, I'm just going to do this, and we'll sell 100,000 books, because it never works that way.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You're training yourself, and you're training your instincts, and you're developing those and honing in on them. It's the same thing like when you're a record producer and you're like, that's the single, that's the hit.
Right.
That's a
you got to
very
know that
important
stuff.
thing. Yeah.
And I see people, and this, I think a lot of people, this is what they don't understand coming into it, even creative people, right? Because there's a lot of artists and writers out there that say, oh, Pete's doing really well doing this. Aaron did pretty well on these couple projects. Look what Ethan's doing. He's, making millions or whatever. Eric July. And so they come out with their IP and they just say, I'm going to do this, whatever it may be. And then it doesn't sell well and they can't figure out why, and it's like, because they didn't take that extra step to say, okay, this is what I want to do. And I'll throw this out right at the beginning here, is that the one thing I always hate is when people say, be true to yourself, do what you want to do, and you'll be fine. Okay, well, that's not true. You have to do what you want to do, but you have to do it in a way that's commercial so that you can bring in the largest audience possible. There's a give and take there. And I don't think a lot of people have a firm understanding of that we've all got a lot of ideas, but they're not all great ideas. And you sort of have to be able to sort of at least have an idea of how to separate those ideas so that you can go with the one that gives you the best chance to succeed, along with all the other elements you have to tackle while promoting and everything else.
Absolutely. Being able to discern and display that taste level is so important to not just having a successful project, but to having a long and successful career, because you could make these consistent bad choices thinking like, no, that's the one, this is one, we'll go with that instead of this, and just time and again it's a failure. It doesn't do well, it doesn't resonate, whatever it may be. And like you said, and I encourage people obviously all the time, do the thing that makes you happy and brings you joy, because the reader's going to feel that. But the key word is that second part there, the reader. Reader. You need to have a reader. You need to have readers. And the more readers you have, the better. And then guess what? You're also going to be happier about that too. One thing, Bob Gable, thank you so much for the super chat. It says Anheuser-Busch CEO blamed his customers for hurting his employees and distributors today, while also saying the buck stops with him. That's corporate doublespeak up the yin yang.
His customers and but the buck stops with me.
Oh. Holy smokes. They just need to stop.
Yeah.
They just need to stop. Thank you, Bob
I've
Gable.
never seen such a, I was talking to a writer one time years ago, and I was just complaining about how, and this goes right across the board with corporate, any kind of corporation, but we were talking specifically about movies, and I'm like, why are all the idiots in charge? And he basically said, because he said all the creative people and all the people that actually have talent, they want to be doing. These other guys, so they're the ones, like the directors and the writers and the actors and, ad agencies, whatever. They're the ones doing, creating stuff. And so that leaves these open spots for zero talented people to get in there and make huge decisions. And they're usually very stupid decisions. And so it sort of clarified for me. I was like, why are all these movies so bad? He goes, because all the people that know what they're doing are making the movies. All the people running the show have no clue. And he was right.
Yeah. It's like, you ever see the movie Office Space?
Was that I haven't seen it, but I'm aware of it.
Okay. Well, there's a whole running gag in there where they keep promoting people who are the most ineffective.
Yeah. You go to the comic industry and look at several examples right now. Right?
Yeah. And honestly, it's true. It's true in so many different businesses. And the people who are absolutely the most driven and the most effective, they often become entrepreneurs because they have so much vision, they have so much they want to accomplish and do. Everyone else is in their way, and they're like, you know what? I'm just gonna go and do this. They're not going to wait for the promotion. They're not going to pop that idea to the boss or whatever. They already know what they want to do, and usually they know how to do it, and they know that they've got the drive to get it done. But all these kinds of people that come in there, it really is. It's they feed into the system. They don't really have a thought, especially a creative thought, in terms of how to take things because of that lack of vision.
Right. Or an understanding of what people might want.
Yeah.
To see or
out
to consume.
Of touch.
Yeah. Just out of it's remarkable. It really is that so many companies will put people in positions of authority, determine the course of their company that have no clue and what they're doing for their job. It's an amazing thing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Fritzy asks this of you. Says, considering what you just said about judging what sells and what doesn't, why do you think there are so few pure superhero books that are being crowdfunded?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, it's always been felt in the independent community that you could never compete with Marvel and DC. So if you look at what Dark Horse, or even when I worked on Ultraverse, everybody tried to launch their own superhero views or universe, Valiant, and they all ultimately failed and got buried because you're fighting against iconic characters that have been around for 70, 80 years in the public mind. So it's really hard to break through that. It's not as bad now because Marvel and DC are just destroying those icons right before our very eyes. And so it's kind of opening the door if people wanted to do that. But I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is a lot of us guys that have been in mainstream anyway, that are coming into the independent market, we've been drawing superheroes our whole life, and now it's kind of an opportunity to do. Well, I had some other ideas that I wanted to do at DC, but they wouldn't let me because they knew it wouldn't sell. Right. So now you have that opportunity to do that. But if you, again, getting back to what sells and what doesn't sell, if you look at Wraith of God as an example, it's a Western, it's a horror, but it's still a superhero comic. It's just dressed up very differently. So it looks new, even though it's still trying to give the audience, a general superhero audience, what they want, but also maybe touch into that person that would prefer a horror comic, or maybe likes period pieces, whatever. So you kind of try to dip your toe in several different ponds there. But it's still, if you look at Wraith of God, it still feels like something that could be part of the Marvel or DC regular line of books. And that's kind of the idea of what I was talking about, trying to figure out what do I want to do, but how can I package it so that it has the widest appeal to as many people as possible.
Yeah, and you make up a great point there with the fact that there's an underpinning of all superhero books that they have other genres that they're actually leaning on. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing, and I do appreciate the question here, Fritzy, but to me, there's no such thing as a pure superhero book because they're all either mixed with crime, sci-fi, horror. There's Western as well out there. They're all these various things. Detective, I mean, literally every single superhero you could think about, they're not just putting on a costume and they're going and beating up a criminal or whatever, and that's that, or a supervillain. There's all other stories taking place, all other things that actually center around what that hero is about, what that story is about, that universe, whatever it may be. So putting on a different pair of glasses when you're looking at these books, if anything, I see constant books out there that are filled with these larger than life characters, full of different supernatural abilities, which is basically what a superhero is. Right. They're augmented human beings or humanoids.
Well, it's very interesting because I think we're always trying, even if we're doing superhero comics, we're always trying to fit them into a certain genre, right? That is beyond what just a generic superhero genre, right? I did a miniseries for DC, a Metamorpho miniseries, and my original concept for it was that he was going to, because he was so, ugly and kind of had this whole Frankenstein thing going on when he became Metamorpho, that he kind of moved underground and became sort of an enforcer and kind of a guy for hire, and wasn't really looking at the moral implications of who he was working for or what he was doing. And eventually that came into play, and it changed him and became more of a hero than just this ambivalent villain. But I was looking at a sort of a crime genre, right? I mean, that's what Batman is. Batman is a crime genre with a superhero in it and colorful characters. And the funny thing is, I turned this in, and Dan DiDio didn't like it at all. He said, I want something bigger. I want something more cosmic. I want blah, blah. So my Metamorpho...
For Metamorpho.
It metamorphed. It transitioned. And it went from this crime sort of noirish kind of story to this really big sci-fi adventure. So again, we're taking those genres and putting superheroes in those genres. So I totally get what you're saying when you say there really isn't a pure superhero genre because it's all made up of pre-existing genres, which are, you know,
Yep.
adventure comics, sci-fi, detective, all that stuff you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Man, yours sounds interesting to me. I don't care to see Metamorpho in space.
Yeah, well, it was very. I really liked it, and I was like stunned when he came back and said, I don't like this. And I thought, oh, great. Well, I guess I'm fired. I'm not going to get to do this. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, so you're going to have to come up with something else. I went, oh, he still wants to do it, you know? And he said, just think bigger, think bigger, think bigger, you know?
The only thing that sounds like to me is coded language for this might end up stepping on the toes of Batman.
Yeah, well, maybe. And
and then people might go, man, this character is kind of cooler than Batman.
Could run into Batman, you know?
Yeah.
No, it was funny
great.
because I also think that there was always this kind of mindset if you're publishing at DC or Marvel, every comic has to feel like a summer event comic. You know what I mean? It's got to be big. It's got to be expansive. It's got to be, you know. So it became this interdimensional thing. I still got my moral. I had the same moral to the story. I was able to work it out, but it's so
good.
funny how drastically different it turned out to be than what I originally pitched to him.
That's so funny. Yeah, look at that. Stuff like that happens all the time.
Yeah,
AL asks, are you doing more Wraith of God soon? Soon.
Well, I'm about 12 pages away from completing Wraith of God Blood Hunters, which is a 100-page book. I'm working on the backup stories in it right now, and like I said, I just got 12 pages to go. So that's going to be all completed in August, and of course, then I'll go to the printer and ship shortly after. I'm going to do, speaking of genre, I'm going to do a Kit Carter graphic novel after that, which is my Space Babe character, 50s bubble helmet Space Babe character. And then after that, I'm following that with Wraith of God 3, which is going to be Fear Hollow. So there you go. There's your teaser. So I am planning on doing more Wraith of God, but it'll be after this graphic novel that I want to do.
Very nice. Man. Before I get to you, Brooding Viking, I see you right there. I'll get to your question in 1 second. I want to share this screen here. This is Aaron's Wraith of God Blood Hunters. This is on Indiegogo right now. It's in demand. You guys can go check it out. The link is right here. It's also in the description of the show. No problem at all. Go check this out if you haven't already. Congratulations to you on your success with this campaign. Man, oh man. 144,978. Can we get to 145 on the show? Is that possible, guys? Please? Just 22 away.
Yeah, come on, somebody.
I mean,
jump in there. Make me feel good about myself.
That would be incredible. With 2,239 backers on board. So we'll see. We'll refresh this at the end of the show. I want to see that go to 145. We have to. It's right there.
No, just knock it on the door, man.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, like you say, you just never know. You know, you go and you push and push and push and hope that and promote and promote and promote and hope that it works out. And this has been something that has worked out pretty well for me so far. So. And I do have a long-term plan for this and the LOPRESTI verse, if you will, for lack of better, So I have different characters and stuff I wanted to get out there. And with this project, I felt like, I couldn't just disregard Wraith of God because the first one was such a big success. But I had other characters and they all tie in, So it's like, well, what if I put in some backup stories to kind of feature some of these other characters that I want to do and see what response is from people and maybe say, okay, I really like this, this elephant guy here is a part of a team that's called the Nightclub. And, maybe people dig that. And so maybe I'll do more of that, or they want to see more Garbage Man because I have the Garbage Man trade paperback that floating out from there that I did a few years ago at DC. And of course there's Kit Carter. I've had people bugging me for probably 15 years to do something with this character. And so I'm like,
wow.
Okay, I'll do it. And my plan is to kind of do it more like a company like you're doing, is rather than do everything myself, bring in an anchor who I've already got lined up. And, I've been coloring all the Kit Carter stuff myself, but, get an anchor, get the colors, and then I can turn around and do a 64-page graphic novel, in 6 months because I'm not doing everything, and then I can get right back to Wraith of God and get to a point where I'm able to launch 2 projects a year instead of just 1. That's kind of my goal. So,
wow, man, very nice, very nice. Man, oh man. All right, so guys, yeah, I'm gonna give this a refresh at the end of the show. Aaron, can you be with us for another half hour or so?
Sure, no problem.
All right. We're going to take a quick little break right here. We're at the halfway point. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. You're watching Comic Book Radio, episode 30. My guest tonight is Aaron LOPRESTI. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
So, it's funny that you should ask that. It's a great question.
That is an awesome question.
When you need to know, count on Sci-Fi for Me to be there asking all of the questions.
It's a good question.
That's a great question.
Interviews with writers, filmmakers, artists, and actors.
I don't think I answered any of your questions.
They're bringing you news and opinion from all over the web. Sci-Fi for Me, delivering the multiverse since 2009.
Red Koi Issue 7, Carrion Road, concludes the Swan King's tale of the evil entity that drew him forth to cross paths with Aiko Redcore, who's journeying to the far island prison of Moraka on the faint hope of a rumor that her husband Josen, long thought dead, might still be alive. In this book, we'll also meet Lord Kitagawa's double-troubled duo, a mysterious pair from the bowels of the Golden Citadel's laboratories, combining reptilian ferocity with dark magic. The Swan King may have bitten off more than he can chew when joining Aiko Redcore on the Carrion Road.
All right, we are back. You're watching Comic Book Radio. My guest tonight is Aaron LOPRESTI. We're going to be talking about Wraith of God. We're also talking about self-publishing, which is hotter now than ever before. And it's not just because it's summertime.
That's right. And well, I got to give you, that's great. You got like advertising right in the middle of your show. I think that's hilarious. I mean,
yeah.
Hilarious in a good way. I'm not going, what is he doing? No, I just thought, that's really clever. I like that.
Yeah, and we do it here for free, too. So if anybody's got like a 30-second to 60-second clip and you want to send it to me, send it to contact@alternacomics.com, and I'll work it into the rotation of the various clips that we have. Just my way of trying to help out some more indie people out there and whatnot, too.
That's
and
awesome.
not show YouTube ads. Because I take the YouTube ads off. No
do you
YouTube
really?
ads. Yeah. I'm tired of it. Tired of seeing them. I don't want anybody else seeing them on my show.
The heck with that, all those pennies I'm getting for advertising.
Yeah, seriously. You know, if you guys want to support the channel or you want to support me, go get some books at Alterna, the Super Chat, a membership, whatever it is. But I'm not taking that YouTube ad dollar money.
Or like they just put
horrible
Bud Light
ads.
commercials in front of us all the time.
They're so bad. But Aaron, we got a question from Brooding Viking here. It says, any plans for a sword and sorcery book?
That is an excellent question. Yes, I really, and I don't know. I'm surprised, Pete, that you haven't thought of this. Maybe you have and just have not, pursued it. But to this point, but I'd like to do, and this is just nostalgia in me, but I would love to do like a magazine sized black and white, like Savage Tales type book, with a bunch of different short stories, because I do have fantasy barbarian type IPs that I would like to do, and I was going to do that with a group of people, but the more I looked at like how do you split up the money, and it just became like so problematic that I was like, I'll push it off, because you almost have to be in a situation, I'd assume, like you're in, where you have a budget for each book, right? And you're offering a certain page rate or whatever to the people that or drawing your book.
Well, I do want to clarify. We don't do page rates at Altern. Altern is 100% creator owned. So the creators come in with their creative team. I pay for the print run and things like that, and then push the book out there. But we don't do a page rate. It's very much like Image Comics, although they don't pay like $2,000 an issue sort of thing based on the invoicing. And
okay, well maybe I'll bring it to you then,
stuff.
Since you're the king of the newsprint. But that was the thing that I was thinking was like, because the guys I'd be working with would be very, high-end guys that want, decent page rate and everything. And it's like, well, if I have to, I mean, they'd be willing to do it for back end off whatever we raised on Indiegogo, but you never know what you're going to raise, right? So it's like, how do you promise somebody a page rate if you don't know you're going to be able to bring it in? And all this, it got really complicated the more I was trying to figure out how to break it down. So I said, the only way this would work, if I didn't do every single story in it, which is kind of not the point, I would want to be in a position where I could go, okay, I'm going to pay you guys X amount of dollars to do the pages. When you do the story, I'll pay you, and then that's it, right? And then I don't have to worry about the back end and all that kind of stuff and whatever. You just hope you make enough to cover the costs, and then whatever you make goes into my pocket as the publisher. That'd probably be the easiest way to do it. And I'm not at a position like Ethan or somebody where you've got a big bankroll that you can draw from to do something like he's doing with Rainbow Brood or something like that. But maybe in the not too distant future, I'll get a little bit ahead and I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, and in terms of something like that too, I think aside from the page rate issue, the page rate would probably be the easiest thing to figure out. The rights being split up and the percentages there.
Right.
That's who wants to be work for hire, who's creating what, who's doing what, who has ownership, who doesn't.
Right.
And I do want to clarify further on things like King Cryptid. My guys get a page rate. I pay everybody a page rate, and then among the different creative teams,
right? But that's your
the
property,
person pays a page rate. Yeah. So that would be my property. I own it, and then their work for hire, and they would get a page rate or a back end bonus based on merchandise we sell that features their merchandise and all that kind of other stuff. But ownership wise, I own the property, and they're getting hired out. And then the same thing goes if there's alternate creators, and there's not too many now, but like Wes Loker's got Unit 44, and he'll hire artists, and he pays the artist and that kind of a thing. But he's contracted with me. His artist is not contracted with me. But I think that you guys could do a really good crowdfunder with that. I think people would love that.
Yeah, I think we'd hit the mark we need to do it, but it was just the more I looked at it, I thought when I first thought of it, it was just like, oh, this will be easy. We'll do this, and this, right? And then I started looking at it and going, well, what if this happens? Oh, and what if this happens? And then, oh, wait a minute, what if that happens? And then, and so before I'd even step my foot into that, I'd have to get every angle figured out exactly how I wanted to handle it, and something that everybody would be, happy with. But it's something I want to do, and I will do, but it's not going to be in the next year.
I wonder, and I don't want to give you more work. You have a ton of work already, but I wonder if you would take on more of the role of a writer and maybe even draw a story, and then you wrote everything. So you would own the characters and everything else, and everyone involved would be work for hire. That would be the only and easiest way that I could imagine working it out, because otherwise, once you start getting like creators coming in, and if there's any egos involved, which there almost always is, and then someone feels like they're getting their toes stepped on in terms of like they're not getting more page time with their characters and their creation or whatever it may be, it could
why
turn
is your story
into
before my story? Why isn't his story
I hate to say that there's nothing petty like that ever happens in comics, but I've seen it nonstop, and I'm sure you've seen it too. I'm like, hey, I want to just make a great comic. Let's just make a great comic. Can we do that?
Exactly.
Some people are like, I want to make a great comic too, but my name's got to be on top, and I got to get paid the most.
Why isn't my name on the cover? Because there's 20 of you. That's why I can't fit them all on there. Oh, that's good.
Let's see. Professor Murph says, I love seeing Aaron's Twitter art posts and his incredible skill. Classic, beautiful work. I agree.
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate that very much.
All right. So
I try to keep my Twitter based on art and nothing else, because my personal opinions on a lot of stuff aren't necessarily what I'm trying to accomplish in selling a book, right?
When it comes to Twitter, I mean, I used to be a little bit more prone to putting personal opinions on a lot of different things, still keeping it towards comics. But nowadays, I'm more open to talk about it. on YouTube, you can get my sense of tone. You can see me as a human being. On Twitter, where everyone's really angry, this happens all the time, where they project then what they're reading. So you could write something that's pretty innocuous, sometimes even positive and support, and some awful miserable person comes along, reads that in their awful miserable tone of voice, and then they just project that right back at you, and you're like, whoa.
Dude, I just tweeted, I was paying bills one month, it's like the one day out of the year, like the first of the month, where you got to pay all your bills, and it's annoying because it's time consuming. You're watching all your money go out the window, right, to pay bills, right? So I just posted on Twitter one time, I said, is there anything worse? And of course I was being, completely facetious, but I was like, is there anything, or hyperbolic, I guess would be the proper term. It was like, is there anything worse than paying tax or paying your bills every month? And you would not believe, I finally took it down because people were like, yeah, try being me and all this kind. I'm like, it was just a joke, It's like, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't even do that.
Yeah, it's like taking a megaphone into an angry bar.
Exactly. They don't even hear what you're saying. They just hear, that guy's got a megaphone, punch him.
He's loud. Shut him up. Let's see. Fritzy says, I would love to see Aaron make a cover for King Cryptid. Oh, I'd love to see that too. I'll have to probably talk to you about that for the next campaign.
Hey, anytime, man.
Get a B side. I like giving the A side cover because we got an A and a B. Do I have a King Cryptid? I got a lot of them around here.
I see you post them on Twitter all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that one, and then the flip side is another cover. Cool. It's not a flip book, but you do two covers on one issue. So I like giving the main interior artist gets the A cover, and then the B side is whoever else. Sometimes it's still the same artist, but that'd be cool to get you on the B side.
Yeah, sure, man.
But
somebody keeps asking me about Nightclub, and it's Fritzy Schnitzel of all people, who's in my chat quite a bit on my show. I can't believe he doesn't know what this is about, but it's a quick story. When I did Garbage Man for DC originally, and then the rights reverted back to me because long story short, they didn't end up using it like they were supposed to contractually, so Dan DiDio just gave it back to me. And the original stories that I did had Batman kind of cameoing in and out of the story, and it took place in Gotham City, right? And so that, when I got it back and I wanted to do a collection, which I tried to crowdfund when I was still working at DC, and I didn't go over because I didn't know what I was doing. So I went to Dark Horse, and they put the collection together for me, but I had to take Batman out of the story, and you couldn't be in Gotham City anymore either, obviously. So I had this super team that used to be called the Creeps that I created back in the 90s. And
you've always had that horror
I don't know.
I can see that.
I don't know what my problem is, but yeah,
it's great. It's
my
great.
My parents were always like, "Why are you so obsessed with monster movies?" And I'm like,
"Because they're friggin' amazing."
I know, they're so cool. But so it's kind of, I mean, they're basically this super team of, I don't say necessarily mutants, but they're like, the city is really dirty. It's very much like Gotham City, and I ended up calling it Murnau City for those of you who are love the German expressionist films. But and so Garbage Man was moved to Murnau City, and I thought, well, this is a perfect place for this super team that I created back in the 90s to kind of exist. And they fit into the story so well that I just removed Batman and put these characters in there, and it was seamless. But they're basically this super great team that operates only at night in this very dirty, crime-ridden city. And there's just like pharmaceutical companies dumping waste everywhere. So there's like nothing, so that's basically what it is. And so they kind of cross over with Garbage Man because they're in the same city, and they're also connected to Wraith of God. So if you bought the first Wraith of God book, there's a 3-page epilogue at the end of that was a stretch goal that we hit. And so I added that 3-page epilogue, and it sort of hints at some connection between Wraith of God and the leader of this group, the Nightclub. And so there hasn't been a lot of stuff done, but you'd have to, if you really kind of felt like you kind of got all the backstory that there is to be had, you could pick up the Garbage Man trade paperback and then it just, like I said, it continues a little bit in the first Wraith of God. You're going to get a backup story in this one that kind of continues it a little bit more. But in a nutshell, that's pretty much what it is.
Okay, great. Brian, I'll answer it really quickly. We got the submissions on it. Came out on a Wednesday on alternacomics.com. Those are the only submissions we take anymore. I'm not taking series submissions anymore. I'm finding too many people are rushing into them. That's a whole topic for another day. I've actually gone ad nauseum into that. But it came out on a Wednesday. The long and short of it, I pay the cover artists. Then the cover artists get, between the issue size, they get 50 to 100 copies for themselves to sell, do whatever they want to do. The story people that come in there, usually the stories are between 1 to 10 pages. They get 5 comp copies per page. So if it's a 10-page story, they get 50 comp copies. But there's no pay involved, and my scale for quality on those, I lower it a lot to get people in there who are good. They're not maybe great enough, or the story isn't good enough yet to be in a series, but it's good, solid stuff, and it deserves a shot, and hopefully it's a step up for them to get something else going and maybe build a following off of being published in the book. So you can go see, it's all up on the Alterna website there for it came out on a Wednesday.
I love how you're like providing opportunities for new creators, because I mean that can be a difficult road to go down, but you seem to be really committed to it, and I'm sure the whole indie community is thankful for that, because many are not.
Yeah. It has earned me quite a few enemies and axes that have been grinding over the years. Because what comes with it is that I was getting about, let's say, 1,000 to 2,000 submissions a year, and I only maybe published like 2 or 3 out of those. And some people deal with rejection well, and many don't. And then a couple others, they send very nasty letters back, no matter how polite you are. And I'll always try to be encouraging if I write back a rejection, saying, hey, just because this one didn't work out doesn't mean that one in the future won't. So feel free to send something in again. I never close the door on someone unless they're being blatantly rude. But based on whatever they're sending in, it's absolutely true. Just because the one that you send in today doesn't mean the one maybe 5 years from now won't be the one that gets in. But some people, man.
I'll tell you, I had guilt just when I did the art contest for Wraith of God. It was like, I had 30 some submissions, and I was like, oh my gosh, and there was a lot of them were very, very good, and you're kind of like, I can only pick one, and so I really felt, I was like, I was telling my wife, I was telling Shelly, I was like, I really feel bad that I can only pick, that only one person is going to win this, because this guy's was really good and this one was really good over here, but that's just the nature of the beast, right? I mean, if you can't deal with a little bit of rejection, you have no business being in this business, because it's full of it.
And it's honestly, and I'll say it every time, it's better to get rejected at this level than you get into a publishing company where the publisher doesn't give a crap. They're just like, oh, someone must like it. And so they put it out, and then you're not ready whatsoever. You've signed that contract, you got your book out, and now you're getting torn to shreds by anyone who's reading this or seeing this online.
Boy, that's so funny, because we didn't used to have to deal with that, because there was no internet, when I first broke in. But as soon as there was, every editor I ever worked for says, stay off the internet, don't read reviews, just do your work, because all the trolls will be out there that let you know how much you suck, and it's not a reflection of what the majority of people think. But now it's like we have to be on the internet all the time, because that's how we do our promotion. And then even conversely,
and I'm not saying that this is good, bad, whatever. This is just the nature of the beast. But there'll be people who come along that they irrationally hate what you do, and they irrationally love what you do. So they can't quantify it either way.
Yep.
And some people love to take the irrational love and build up and pump up their ego. And all of a sudden, they're, God's gift. And then some people take also the hatred, and then all of a sudden they think every line they draw is the worst line in the world. Every word they type is horrible, and they get all this stuff into their heads. So if you do have that mindset, if you are of that nature and you are relatively more thin-skinned with that, and it's going to so deter your creative path, you really do have to find a way to avoid the internet. But I would suggest, instead of avoiding everything, toughen up a little bit. It's okay, and rationalize it and toughen up by saying, well, there's things I really love and there's things I really don't love so much, and that's okay. And the way that you're allowed to have those opinions and feelings, other people are too. It's not this personal thing until you make it personal most of the time. That's at least my experience.
Well, and the thing is, what the one advantage to crawling up the ladder like I did in mainstream comics is I got so much criticism, so much rejection from the people that were hiring before I even got published.
Yeah.
But after a while, you just become numb to it. You get so used to it, and you say, yeah, there's going to be people that don't like what I'm doing. That's not going to stop me from doing it, because there's going to be people that do like what I'm doing, and you kind of focus on that. And I do listen to criticism, and I don't necessarily always agree with it, but I will inevitably, even if I'm standoffish about the criticism, after the person leaves, I'll be like, I'll go back and look and see, oh, do they have any, was there any merit to what they're saying? And you really start, you try to turn it around and turn it into a positive, and how it can be constructive, and maybe this person's right, maybe I can make this better.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you say, you know what, that criticism he was right. I need to reconsider this. Or you can look at it and go, the guy missed the entire point. That's on him. It's not me. But you can't take it personal, because you just get too much of it and it'll just destroy you.
Yeah. If you live and die by that kind of feedback, oh my Lord, you're going to go insane.
Yeah.
You're going to just lose your mind. So yeah, I don't recommend taking that attitude. All right. So I do have the link in here. You guys might have missed it because we're having such a great conversation tonight. I'm having it with Aaron LOPRESTI, and I know you guys are being great in the chat, and I appreciate you guys being in the chat with your questions too. But if you do want to come on the show, this is something we do on Comic Book Radio. We treat it like it's a radio show, even though it's kind of not. You can join the show, come on live on the air with a question or comment for my guest. That would be Mr. Aaron LOPRESTI. Not me. Don't have a question or comment for me. We want to give our undivided attention to the guest.
So there's the criticism right here.
Complaints for me are another day, or in the comments afterwards on the show, but not while we have a wonderful guest here with us. So you can join the show live. We'll do one at a time, and don't be shy. Come on and join the show with your question or comment, and hopefully we get a couple people. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It is what it is.
Brian Suddenly Old is asking, Aaron, what was the Scion title you worked on? I don't even know what that means. I know Scion was a title at CrossGen, I think, but I never worked on it. I don't know. Is Scion a publisher? Brian, are you thinking I did something I didn't do, or am I forgetting something I did?
It's possible.
I don't know. I don't know. You're gonna have to clarify that, Brian.
Yeah, Brian, can you clarify a little bit more? And thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And we'll try to keep doing things that you like.
That's right.
And Brian says I meant CrossGen. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I worked on a book called Mystic, which was kind of their female Doctor Strange book, and that was an interesting, because I've been 2 times in my, well, this is I guess the 3rd time now, because I am all out of mainstream, whether I want to be or not, which I do want to be, but
you're better.
I have no choice. But I've been blacklisted before, simply because of I did a book called Tachyon that did not sell well, and so they kind of put it all on me, even though I would argue that it was as much the writer's fault as it was my fault. But
who is this for?
DC Comics.
Oh wow. Yeah,
John Byrne ended up taking up the character and putting him in New Gods, and they actually made a little hero click out of him, which I've got around here someplace. I got no money for that, but yeah, so I couldn't get any work at DC, and then I had left Marvel to go to Malibu, so they weren't too pleased with me, and then I ended up going over to DC from Malibu, and then when I got blacklisted at DC, I didn't have anything going on, so I was out of work for like 3 months. I finally got back in just by grinding and going back the whole routine of, once again, showing portfolios. I'd already been in Wizard magazine, and here I was, begging for work again. But that's the nature of the beast. And then I got back in and I was working at Marvel and stuff at X-Men office, and things were looking really, really good. And then both the editors that had hired me got fired. And so then I was suddenly, drowning again. And that's when CrossGen had popped up, and I got, offered to go do CrossGen. And I was just like, I got to take the money. We didn't want to pack up and move to Florida, but, that's where the job was. And I was able to negotiate. They were paying salaries and they had benefits. It was like a real job.
Around what year was this, would you say?
2002 is when I moved down when we family moved down to Florida. My wife wasn't too thrilled about it. The kids were young enough that they didn't really care. And, we lived there for 2 years or so until they went under. And then, but the book I worked on there was a book called Mystic. And it's where I met Matt Ryan, who ended up being, a pretty regular inker for me over the years. And, we were everybody there was doing the best work of their careers, because we were all he had bought this huge warehouse, in an industrial park, and put all our studio, basically it was the entire, all the writers were there, the artists were there, the colorists were there, the inkers were there, all in-house. And we all worked 9 to 5, basically 5 days a week. We had the weekends off. It was an amazing experience, because even to that point, when I was just about 40, or maybe just about to turn 40. I think I turned 40 when I was there. But I'd been a freelancer my entire life. And I'd never, other than the odd jobs I had to take while I was trying to break in, I'd never worked a regular job like that before. And it was just the most bizarre thing to have the weekends off, right? And so it was really cool. But with anybody with any amount of experience, you could look at the situation and go, this is going to implode, because there's no way they can be paying us this much money, give us benefits, days off, all this kind of stuff, and generate enough money to sell these, in sales to keep it going, which was exactly what happened. So I was prepared for it to go under. And, but when it did, all of us that had worked there, guys like Jimmy Chung, Mike Perkins got started there as an inker. There was, anyway, the other guys. And we were all put ourselves in a pretty good position, because everybody in the industry, DC and Marvel, were aware of the books we were doing and the work we were doing. And like I said, because they put us in this position where it was kind of a no pressure kind of thing, we had to do 5 pages a week, which sounds like a lot to most people, but if you're a freelancer, that's cake. And I had the inker right next to me. So I'd drop the pages off to Matt and I'd say, okay, this is what I'm going for here. And I could literally look over his shoulder and make sure he did exactly what I wanted him to do. And then I'd take him over to the colorist and say, okay, this is what I was thinking here, and give them some art direction. So basically the books were they came out exactly like you wanted them to look. And so everything looked great. And so we were able to get a lot of opportunities coming out of CrossGen because of the work we had done there. And so just about everybody landed on their feet big time. I ended up back at Marvel for 5 years before I ended up going to DC and working on pretty good books, So I did Planet Hulk while I was there, Ms. Marvel, things like that. I did a lot of stuff in the X-Men office. So, but that's kind of the CrossGen story in a nutshell. It was a great idea. You'd think if you had a money pit, if you're one of these multi-billionaires who didn't mind losing money every month, it's a great model, because for the creative people, because we're putting out great books, and it wasn't a super high pressure situation, and you got the benefits that people having normal jobs got. But like I said, it's just not a model that can work in the comic industry. There's just not enough money in it.
I mean, in your opinion, other than the fact that the bigger problem obviously is like you said, there's just not enough money in the industry, whatever it may be. But in your opinion, what could be done to course correct that, to change that situation, so there would be enough money to have that sort of thing thriving, and not just more sales, not just that. Is there anything specifically that had occurred, especially in your experience with CrossGen?
Well, I hate to sound like a downer, but I have this conversation with Dave Ulbrich, who was the publisher at Malibu and Ultraverse back in the 90s. We're still really good friends. And every time we see each other, we're like, so have you figured out how to make money in comics yet? We kind of laughed and like, not yet. But because CrossGen was trying to do just different types of promotion in areas that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before, and that type of thing. And it all comes down to, there's two things that are the biggest problem, Pete, and you know this, is that it's the perception of comics, American comics, that's, it's better than it's ever been thanks to the Marvel movies. People aren't embarrassed, to say, oh yeah, I read Superman or whatever, but it's still problematic. And then of course you're dealing with the competition, which is video games, and there's so much more immersive and movies, and then that's always been a problem, movies, but now it's like in your house on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. So and we're raising kids in a just totally digital age, and so it's a hard sell. And I think we're like in this indie movement we got going right now. I think the best we can do at right now is sort of see if we can become the cool kids on the block again doing this stuff, and have the patience and the stamina to stick with it and be consistent and consistently put out good product and consistently, meet campaigns. And, we're all over YouTube, everybody has their own YouTube channel now, and promoting. And I honestly think that's about all you can do. Marvel and DC had great opportunities when they were doing the MCU movies to put comic books in the lobbies of movie theaters and to try and get those moviegoers to become comic fans, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of opportunities that don't come around very often. When they do, you got to take advantage of them. And I was actually shocked that no one was taking advantage of that, or at least trying to.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, and I don't know if it's business dealings that just didn't work out and didn't happen and they tried, or if it was this weird arrogance, or if it was a combination of a couple other things going on in terms of exclusivity deals, and the distribution was supposed to maybe work out something, and if they didn't do it through them, I mean, there's so much red tape and bureaucracy with the entire thing when you get to that corporate level, that there could be people with ideas, and I'll be generous right now, and I know earlier we weren't that generous. I'll be generous right now and say that maybe there are some people that did have ideas and they were stonewalled. But none of that matters, because at the end of the day, it still is the same result, and the result that had occurred hurt comics, it hurt creators, it hurt those properties that were being adapted to film. And now, like you had mentioned, that there's tons of people out there that know of these characters from these bigger companies, but I guarantee if you just polled every single person that walked out of the theater and said, great, are you going to go down to your local comic shop now and pick up, the latest whatever it is that you just watched? Huh? It'd be no.
Right, exactly. But you made the great point by saying corporate, because if you were, I obviously remember, but back, when comic books first started out, all the way up until, I don't know when Warner Brothers bought DC, and, I know when Disney bought Marvel, but Disney or DC and Marvel were like the masters of their own domain. They were the company, right? And so they were able to do stuff. And I think the bigger the corporation, you think, well, my gosh, there's more money, they'll just expand. But it usually works the other way. They get buried in this big corporation, and the corporation says, oh, these comics are only generating 50 million in sales a year. That's nothing. It's costing us money. Let's get rid of it, or let's not promote it, because they don't care about the product. And, when comics were most successful was when they were this small operation, kind of like we're doing now, when it really did matter to us, and it does matter to us, but it mattered to them, and they're figuring out how can we get, that's the product they were selling. They weren't worried about movies or whatever. They were selling the comics. And so that's
they
when
could adapt and be responsive and reflexive. Right,
because they're always looking for another way to, how can I get this in front of more eyeballs? I mean, Motion Picture Funnies Weekly was the first appearance of the Submariner back in 1939, and that was in a giveaway that these publishers were putting in movie theaters, because they knew kids were going in there to buy movies or see movies, and then they'd see this book with free comics, and they'd pick it up, and there's the Submariner. And they were doing all sorts of stuff like that, because they were this it was Martin Goodman and a couple of guys running Marvel Comics, and they're like, how can we make money, kid? And that kind of thing. And now it just gets buried. And even like you said, if they have a good idea, it's probably going to get destroyed in committee by a bunch of people that don't give a rip.
Yeah, even the idea of those companies expanding into animation and TV and film at the time, it was still with the whole purpose of it comes back to the comics, it comes back to the characters, it comes, and it's growing essentially the whole thing. There's a synergy involved, and as soon as you had those people step out of the way that had practically nothing to do with those comics, and they had no role whatsoever in any of these facets of the industry, that's when you start getting this whole disconnect. And it's because there's not just a disconnect that's being accidentally done through the screen to the comic, but it's a purposeful disconnect because it's literally people who have no idea of what's what. They don't care what's going on. Yeah. The idea isn't to push what's happening on the film, should be also what's kind of occurring in the comic. Right. The characters that you would see on the film would also then be there in the comic, that when you go to the shop. Now, if you're a savvy shop owner, you could go, look, what's out right now, skip it. You're going to want to have these, and point them to the classic collections and things like that if they're going to be looking like what's on the screen.
Right.
But there's so many different missteps that the overall industry took, and it's such a shame because it's such a rich industry in terms of the stories and the characters and everything, as we can see. It's attested to constantly with when these movies come out, even one that is you see a movie that's a flop and it still made a killing. It still made more than the comic industry would make in that year.
Right.
And it'll be considered a flop, relatively speaking. That's how insane all of this is. And seeing that, yeah.
You and I as small publishers, right? Our profit margin is a lot different than Warner Brothers' profit margin. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So again, when Marvel and DC were in control of their own businesses, they were like, if they made $50 million, they were like, wow, we're raking it in. You know what I mean? So it's all this perspective, and I get the idea of, as a smaller company, that's really the goal, right? Is to turn around and sell it to a bigger company so you can get the big payday and all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into the company. Now you're reaping the benefit financially. But then it destroys whatever.
Always comes
inevitably
at a cost.
Destroys whatever company you just sold.
It's like a deal with the devil.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's kind of funny what George Lucas did, right? He's like, instead of like selling Star Wars and saying, I'm gonna stick around as the producer or whatever, because he could have made any deal he wanted, right, with Disney, but they would have eventually forced him out anyway, right? So you just take the money and go, okay, it's yours, and that's, I think to a certain degree, you had like Marvel and DC made those decisions, but they kind of were, they didn't just cut loose. They still were trying to do things their own way, and they just became more and more oppressed by corporate. Yeah. And then pretty soon you got corporate bringing in corporate people to run the comic book business, and Mark Chiarello's out of a job. Dan DiDio's no longer publishing comics. And all these people, Archie Goodwin, all these, of course, Archie passed away before any of this happened, but you had guys that knew what they were doing. They knew how to sell comics. They knew what sold. They knew what they were looking for when they were hiring new talent. And that is completely gone from the industry now. I know more than any editor working at any company, probably. And that's, that shouldn't be the case. You should have guys.
There's a multitude of readers out there that know more than most of the editors.
Yeah. There should be full of like seasoned professionals. I should be an editor someplace going, come on, kid, I'll show you the ropes. But that's just not, that's not what it's become. So now it's up to us to, try and have each other's backs as much as we can, because we're all independent entrepreneurs, but we're out there pushing comics because we love comics, and that's kind of how Marvel and DC started.
Yeah.
And so we have an opportunity, I think, to kind of start it over, and time will tell whether or not society is willing to kind of take a step back and say, we want printed material again. The nostalgia kicks in, and
oh, absolutely. I think it's 100%. It's already there. People are so inundated with digital. I think that there's this huge narrative push to make people believe that they don't want physical media. But then if you actually put your ear to the ground, there's a whole amount of people that miss and want.
Yep.
physical media again. Print, movies, music, whatever it may be. I mean, my vinyl collection is bigger than it's ever been. You know, I'm putting comics on newsprint. You know, we're not going away from that. You're getting physical books out there. There's all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't mean that digital is going to go away. But I think that the death of print media is so greatly exaggerated. And it's mostly because print media as we know it is centered around what? News media. And news media is obsolete and dead as soon as it's get printed. You know, but as soon as comics start treating it as, oh, it should be topical and it should be these things and whatever's buzzworthy and trendy, you know, let's try to, you know, do that. As soon as that happens, the trend's already dead.
Yep.
You know, so and comics just, instead of becoming evergreen and telling stories that can resonate today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, it turns into, well, as soon as it hits the stands, if we're going to be, you know, trendy with this, that thing's already dated and cringy, you know, and comics just turned into newspapers and magazines, and you're kicking yourself in the ass, and it over and over again. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the disconnect. It shows.
Well, you can just look at all the movies and everything, especially the first wave of Marvel movies. They were all taken out of books that are decades old because the stories are timeless. You know, they're not about politics. They're not about a woke agenda or whatever your agenda is. It's about, you know, heroism and morality and things that are timeless and
inspirational and aspirational.
Yes, exactly. And that's, you know, again, that's what's opened the door for us as independent creators to fill that void, because that's not what's being produced in mass anymore. I mean, there might be a few books out there that are still decent, I don't know, but for the most part, that's not the direction either one of the Marvel or DC are going with the material. So the door's open for us to take advantage of that, and I think a lot of us are doing that.
Yeah, and that's what I'd love to see. And I think, honestly, stuff like this, especially where it is being done in such a oddly transparent way. And what I mean by that is, and you guys, someone better have contributed $22 to this campaign. I'm going to refresh it right now. Please, somebody. Yes!
There it is. Hey, thank you so much. We got that one backer got in there and pushed it over. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate that.
Beautiful. $145,011. You got him right over the top with the 145 on the show. That's beautiful to see. Congrats, Aaron.
$55,000 behind Rini. So come on, you guys.
Man, oh man. But see, I was gonna actually talk about that. And now for younger generations or whoever's up and coming in comics, this kind of thing is done in such a transparent way now that it was never done really before. It was kind of like this weird smoke and mirrors with a lot of comic sales and book sales in general. You know, there's a lot of book publishers out there that buy a lot of books back so they could get on that New York Times bestseller list, let me tell you. You know, so a lot of this kind of stuff was this manufactured success, and they could fool and pull the, you know, the wool over the up and comers' eyes and their customers as well, and manufacture all of this bullshit. But on something like this, it's like, nope, Aaron LOPRESTI raised that. It's right there, you know, or whoever it is you want to point to and be like, wow, that's inspirational. And that shows that all these things we always hear, especially that trend with the whole comics broke me thing. It's like you're letting comics break you. Comics don't need to break you. You know, you need to apply yourself, maybe learn a different skill set, maybe get out there, maybe change your attitude up, whatever it may be, maybe create something that would have more appeal to people, that you could still be interested in, of course. But it's out there. There's people out there that are obviously willing, able, and want to support comics, and you can make a living making your comic. And now more than ever before, if someone's like, there's no way, no one's making a living in comics. No one's making a living making comics. Bullshit. Bullshit. There's so many people making a living in comics right now, but maybe not in the traditional sense. Maybe you got to be more of an entrepreneur. So study up on that and adapt yourself and apply yourself.
Well, that's the thing. And that's kind of, I hate to sound like, you know, World War II patriotic, but it's like, that's the whole spirit of what's, you know, made America great, is just this, everybody's got an opportunity, right? But you got to take advantage of your opportunities. You got to make stuff happen. You got to be involved. You can't just sit there and expect a bag of money to drop in your lap. But there is opportunity out there, but you got to work for it. And you should never be afraid of hard work, because when something does succeed and you put that time into it, the reward is so great. That it's like the idea that we always used to say is, don't buy your kid a car, because you let them buy their own car, and then they treat it totally differently, because they earned it and they worked for it and they got the car and they paid for the car, and it's their car, and they're going to treasure
means something.
that.
It means all the
it means
time
something.
and the money and the effort they put into it. Yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it pays off, it's such a great, rewarding feeling. And it doesn't necessarily have to be comics. There's a million things that anybody can do but just, this is a great country and a great opportunity. It still is. And if we can get rid of Biden, that'll help. But but there's still opportunity out there to do this kind of thing. But it takes work and it takes sacrifice to really be successful at anything. And maybe that's just getting by as a comic book creator or whatever. But if you're doing what you want to do and you're able to do it, even if you're not getting rich doing it, it's still pretty rewarding. So,
yeah, I agree. GJ, what's up? GJ says, good evening. I'm out and about with my family. Just wanted to say hello to Aaron LOPRESTI and Peter Cimetti in the mighty chat. I'll catch the replay when I get home. Wraith of God 2 and King Cryptid. Thank you so much, GJ.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, GJ.
But yeah, Aaron, thank you so much. Seriously, it's been a wonderful show. Fritzy wants to know if you're going to do jumping jacks when you reach 200K.
Oh, yeah. I'll do them better than Rainey, because I a little bit more coordinated. So I'll have to stretch out first before I do it. But I'll do push-ups and jumping jacks. How's that?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Beautiful. Man, oh, man. Aaron, I feel like we could have another one of these chats in the near future. There's so much to discuss.
There sure is.
But it was a wonderful time having you on tonight, man. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was great. Everybody, go check out Wraith of God. He just passed the 145K mark tonight on the show. Look at that. Beautiful. You guys came through. It was teeter-tottering right there, 22 away from 145, and you guys made sure it happened. But don't stop there. Go check this book out. Back it. The link is in the description of the show. And Aaron, again, thank you so much. Everybody in the chat, you guys were great as well. You guys made this show fantastic with some of your questions, too. Goodness. I know we didn't have anybody come on air with us. Sometimes we don't, but it's okay. You guys, everyone have a wonderful night. I'm going to be back again, oh boy, maybe Saturday. King Cryptid number 5 to 9 is going to launch July 8th on Indiegogo and alternacomics.com. Make sure to sign up for that on Indiegogo or alternacomics.com through our newsletter. But other than that, man, oh man, everyone have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon. Aaron, is there anything you want to say before we go?
No, just thanks, guys. I appreciate the support with Wraith of God, and also check out Aaron live at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday.
All
Who knows
right,
what
awesome.
I'll do? I don't, because I haven't even planned the show yet, but I'll be there.
Yeah, we were talking about before we started. I got a jam-packed July full of tons of guests, and I need to keep it that way. Otherwise, I make up excuses not to do a show and do other things that I got to get done. But go watch Aaron on there. I'm gonna put your YouTube channel as well after we're done with this. I'm gonna put that into the description of the show too. Again, everybody have a wonderful night. This was Comic Book Radio episode 30 with Aaron LOPRESTI. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and thank you guys for being here. Aaron, thank you as well. Everyone,
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
take it easy, everybody.